By the way, I'm giving the classes 10 o'clock at night. So now it's me and Yossel. Beryl, I missed you last night in the 10 o'clock Vata Tetzave. No complaints, but a complaint. No, I have no right to complain, but I'm complaining anyway. Look at this.
I was very tired last night.
You know, I didn't know you were human. I didn't know that was part of the equation. Lo yodaiti. If I would have known, we'll give God andish. I thought you were a malach. Okay, not that you guys care, but yesterday, my children made an upshedding. In other words, I'm a Zayde. I went to an upshedding as a Zayde, which is kind of cool. You get all the covered, you got to do none of the work. What's the difference between a father and a Zayde? Father gives covered and does work. A grandfather takes covered and does nothing. Anyway, Baruch Hashem, let Hashem Yisbarach. So the Shia will be the Schos Menachem Mendel HaLevi Ben Chaya Mushke, and for the four Shleimer for Rav Abba Ben Risha. That's my father. Baruch Hashem is coming along, as I noch beser. Okay, we ready to roll, people? We're going to start Perek Yud Aleph from the beginning again. Okay? Let me put it to you this way. Years ago, that means 25 years ago, when I first started out as a mashpia, I used to give a shir in Chassidus morning and night. That means I always did. In the morning we had a regular syllabus. Every year I taught, good morning, Menachem Mendel Tzadik. I taught my morim of the Rebbe, of Achdus, right? I would always start V'Yodaita Moskva, and then I would do Ner Chanech Mem Gimel, and then we would do the Hemshech Ha'umnom, Rebrachye, and then whatever time we had left, we would do Pesach, the Matzah Hemshech, what's about Mala and Seviv, and then we would do the Hemshech Hamad, whatever it is. Havai Pocket the Salarish Bandal. I had a whole syllabus that I would do every single year. And in the evenings I taught Derech Mitzvah. I taught Derech Mitzvah for a lot of years. But I stopped teaching Derech Mitzvah probably 20 years ago. Yeah, this is the first time I'm teaching Derech Mitzvah in a very, very long time. And I advertised that we learned good stuff this year. We didn't cover a lot, but we learned good. We learned Minei Melech, we learned Tshuva, we learned Avos Yisrael, of course. Right? And then we learned the two mitzvahs that I wanted to do Yiyud. But in order to do Yiyud, you have to do Avedivri, and that dominated the year. Avedivri and Yiyud Am Ivriya. The whole idea of Kisikne Avedivri, that Moshe Rabbeinu was raising Yidden up into Atzilus, was very exciting and important to me. It's a classic Inyan in Chassidus, but here you have it in Derech Mitzvah. In the signature of the Rebbe the Tzemach Tzedek. But I advertised in the beginning, I said, after Pesach we're doing Shoresh Mitzvas Hatefilla. Finished, that's what I said. After Pesach, wherever we're holding, we're stopping what we're doing and doing Shoresh Mitzvas Hatefilla. And we did. We did it on Zoom instead of Ponim El Ponim. And if we had been sitting in a shir rather than doing this on the computer, had we learned more or had we learned less? Some days I feel like for sure we would have learned more. The conversations would have been different. And some days I feel like no, we would. One thing I think for sure, that people on Zoom listen better than in shir, by and large. In other words, on average, there's people who listen better in shir, there's people who listen better on Zoom. But on average, I believe that in this group, in a small group, if the groups get too big, the Zoom people they zoom off to some other place. I feel that Al Haroiv, which means more than 50%, people were listening here better than they listen in other places. Anyway, and when I said I want to do Shoresh Mitzvas Hatefilla, I didn't mean I want to do Shoresh Mitzvas Hatefilla als Tefillah. I wanted to do Shoresh Mitzvas Hatefilla als explaining to you the Esesfidas. Shoresh Mitzvas Hatefilla has a Hagdama. And the Hagdama, we call it Lechaven B'Shem. In the last two parakim, we've been calling it Yichudim. I wanted to teach this to you because it's very important for me that my Talmidim should have a good sense of the inyan of the Sfiras, of the Esesfiras. That's my goal. When I started this, that's what I wanted to do. Now, we started it right after Pesach, so it's Iyar and Sivan, 2 months. This is our 40th shiur, by the way. It's our 40th shiur. And I believe that on some level we did this. On some level, I'm not going to say every bocher is an expert on Esesfiris, but I believe that on some level, we all understand. I believe that on some level, we all understand a little bit the meaning of Sfiris. It's a very, very complicated Nekuda. It's a very, very complicated Nekuda. But like I said, I think that on some level, at least, we were matzliach to teach the inyan of the Esesfiris. In short, the inyan of the Esesfiris is godliness, something vayachal which is not the Eibishter anymore, in quotations, and not world yet, Getlichkeit, godliness. And in long, the inyan of the Esesfiris is godliness in Kalim, right? That's Atzilus. Atzilus is godliness in Kalim. Eidin Seif in Kalim, that's Atzilus. And godliness is very, very hard to understand. Godliness is the inyan of Elokus is sehr, sehr schwer zu verstehen. I told us to you in Perek Beis of this Maimed, and we're going to be revisiting this now. But what I really want to say, I'm talking in circles already. What I really want to say is, I learned with you what I needed to learn with you. In other words, if the year would end today, and we have a few more days, Baruch Hashem, I would say to you what it was that I wanted to teach you. From the beginning of Shoresh Mitzvas Hatefilla, which is, like I said to you in the other days, Rabbi Emmanuel Shachat Olav Shalom records in his book, Mystical Concepts in Chassidus, we did it. In other words, I feel like we had enough conversations, enough discussion to explain, number one, the concept of Metzias, of Kalim, of Elames, and the idea of Oir, Getlichkeit Oir, and how Oir comes into Keli. I feel like we covered this. If I get 6 lines, 7 lines, 8 lines, the Perek Aleph, I will for sure have finished, okay? But as we end the year, I'm going to go over it one more time. In other words, the beginning of Perek Aleph is going to be our excuse to again wallow in the question of Getlichkeit. Okay, that's what we're going to do. In other words, I'm planning on wasting time. And Bechlal, that's what I do for a living. I eat up clock. I mean, I don't mean to be sarcastic, but yeah. I mean, teaching is, I told you this many times, I have an argument with a very important colleague of mine. In my mind, teaching is the ability to repeat things in a way that the students can hear it until they are able to internalize it. You don't say it once, you say it at least twice, sometimes 3 times. When the most important statements you make when you're teaching a Maimon Chassidus, you repeat and you repeat and you repeat until the students say, aha, das ist sehr wichtig, sehr, sehr wichtig. So, we're going to start Perek Aleph, okay? And I'm reading inside. I'm not wasting any time. I'll go back to my speech after I read a few lines of Perek Aleph. Miyu adayin kosher l'cha'ir. However, the question is still difficult. The Ima is that even though shahayich or the zevugim b'des hanal, that when we talked about the yichudim, and the yichudim really means zivuk hamidas, bringing together chochma and bina and midas and malchus, but the Rebbe insisted that it's not bringing together Chochma and Bina. It's bringing together the Eidin Seif and Chochma and the Eidin Seif and Bina. And the same is true also. It's not bringing together Zoh and Malchus. It's bringing together the Eidin Seif and Zoh. And the Eidin Seif and Malchus, says the Rebbe, who mamish is literally Hamshachas Eidin Seif HaMalubish b'Midas v'chuli. The bringing down of the Eidin Seif, which is revealed in the Midas. V'lei Zivuk HaMidas Levad. It's not a meeting of Chochma and Bina or Midas and Malchus. It's the meeting of the Eidin Seif and Chochma and the Eidin Seif and Bina and the Eidin Seif of Zoh and the Eidin Seif of Malchus. Im kol zeh, says the Rebbe, nevertheless, and as he repeats the kasha one more time. Kivon, whereas, since Shamides Hemrakatipa Miyukiyanis, the Midas are just like a drop in the ocean. And as the Rebbe said on the previous page, they're even less than a drop in the ocean. Because the drop to the ocean is b'medida v'agbala, this is much, much more. V'imkein lech'eira, and therefore the question is, ha'eir ein seif shebeteichon the elokus, which is inside of them, nimshach al yedei, hatzimtzum hayadu, is drawn down to the aforementioned simtzum, hanikra makim pane, which is called an evacuated space, v'imkein, and therefore, adayin einei arech, there is still a quantum separation, that means an absolute distance, a very big farness. Lagabi Eidin Seif Atzmei, when talking about the Eidin Seif. In other words, the Eidin Seif which comes into the Sfiris is much less than the Sfiris as it is by itself. And the Rebbe says, Shaboy, that in Eidin Seif itself is Kol Magama Seinu V'Cheftzenu V'Chukasenu. Our entire aspiration, our entire desire, our entire thirst is to have a connection to Eidin Seif. So the Kasha is again, fine. Yichudim are allowed. Yichudim are kosher, right? And according to this Maimon, not only Yichudim are allowed and kosher, Yichudim are requisite. They're necessary. Just like L'chavim B'Shem is necessary because of the union of Shvachim and Hilulim, which the Rebbe explained to us in the earlier perek. Fine. So you need to have L'chavim B'Shem. You need to have Yichudim. But we go back to the same question again. The Eidin Seif, which is in the Sfiris, is much, much lower than the Eidin Seif, which is not in the Sfiris. And there's really no way around it. That's the Kasha. So in other words, Eidin Seif, which is Maslabish and the Sfiris of Atzilus. I understand. When I be Miyachad Yechudim, of course the Rebbe is going to speak about Miyachad Yechudim and Tefillah. But I pointed out that Miyachad Yechudim is not only in Tefillah, Miyachad Yechudim is in Kavanos HaMitzvahs. Every mitzvah is a Yichud. Miyachad Yechudim means you're bringing together the Eidin Seif of one midah or one sfira with the Eidin Seif of a different sfira to get a certain effect. So l'chayre, any time anybody is Miyachad Yechudim, it's Taka Eidin Seif and not midas, but it's the Eidin Seif on the level of the midas. It's a much lower Eidin Seif. Okay? Let's read the question again. I'm going to read the question one more time. 3 lines into the Maimon. I'm pashat repeating myself, okay? V'imkein the kasha is l'cha'era. Ha'erein seif shebeteicha. The Eidin Seif which goes into the midas and the sfiris, nimshach hayadei hatzimtzum hayadu, has to pass through the tzimtzum. And what do we know about the tzimtzum? Hanikra mokim pano, it takes away the Eidin Seif completely. It leaves over none of the Eidin Seif. And then what comes afterwards is a totally different echos of Eidin Seif. The question still is extant, is still existent. The Eidin Seif which comes after the Tzimtzum is so much lower than the Eidin Seif which comes before the Tzimtzum. Or to say it in more contextual terms, the Eidin Seif which goes into the Esesfiris is so much lower than the Eidin Seif which is the higher than the Esesfiris. And the Rebbe's Kashi is Shabei Kol Magamasenu V'Chavtzenu V'Chukasenu. And that's what we're after. We're after godliness. We're not after the godliness in Atzilus. We're after godliness plain. So the Kasha is, what did we gain? We understand L'chavim B'Shem. We understand Yechudim. But as they say in Brooklyn, Abefart. But still, the Eidin Seif to which we are relating is only the Eidin Seif, quote, after the Tzimtzum, or more specifically, it's only the Eidin Seif which is Maslabish in the Sfiris. This is the Kasha that the Rebbe is asking. Now comes the teretz. And the teretz, it's really just a few shuris. It's not a very, very long teretz. I'm reading the answer to the question. Even though the creation of the 10 spheres is it's taka emes, what I said 2 lines ago. That the Eidin Seif which goes into the spheres of Atzilus has gone through the Tzimtzum and has gone through the Makam Panui. And I said to you before, more specifically, it's also gone through the change that allows it to come into Kelim. Nevertheless, Eidin Seif Shemishlabes B'Teichon. It's true taka. The Eidin Seif which goes into Kelim may be much lower. However, Hu Ha'ara is simply a reflection, it's a trace. May Eidin Seif mamish, from the same Eidin Seif, Kimei Shehu L'mayla Maya Tzimtzum, the way it's higher than the Tzimtzum. In other words, the Rebbe's teretz is that even though the Eidin Seif has gone through significant change, in order to be begilui, in Kelim, and in order to actually go into Kelim, says the Rebbe, nevertheless, it's still the same Eidin Seif. V'hu inyan hakav me'ein seif. This is what we call in the culture of Kabbalah the kav, the ruled, the measured line of godliness, which is called kav. She'nim shach achar hatzimtzum, which has to go through the tzimtzum to come into Elames. And even though it's changed so much, it's still exactly the same. Okay? That's it. Now, I'm going to read two more lines. No, let me stop right here, okay? I gave you a share Thursday. I believe I gave you a share Thursday, right? It's been a very hectic weekend, but I believe I gave you a share on Thursday. And what I told you in the share on Thursday in part is that there's an expression in Kabbalah which is called Chazar V'Heir. Chazar V'Heir means that even though the Erein Seif is changed so much by Tzimtzum Arishain, the Erein Seif is not changed at all by Tzimtzum Arishain. That's what Chazar V'Heir means. In other words, what the Tzemach Tzedek is saying in these few lines, and it's literally a few lines, is even though we speak about so many levels of godliness, if it's godliness, it's godliness, it's godliness. If it's not godliness, then it's not godliness, it's not godliness. But if it is godliness, it doesn't matter how much this godliness has been changed and adapted and brought into Mokim and brought into Kalim, as much as the Getlachkeit changes, if it's Getlachkeit, if it's godliness, it's always the same. That's the Nakuda. That's the Nakuda of what the Rebbe said in these few lines. Okay? So if you have your access to your question sheet, if you have access to the question sheet, which I took Thursday's question sheet, I took away the kashas that when I get to the end of Perek Yud, I added a few more kashas that I want to talk about. If you have access to your question sheet, open up question 1. It reads, what new question is asked in the beginning of Perek Yud Aleph? And the answer is, we understand we're dealing with Erein Seif, not with Midas. But we're dealing with an incredibly Tzimtzum Erein Seif. We're dealing with the Tzimtzum Erein Seif, first of all, because Tzimtzum Arishin Nesiluk Lagamri, and second of all, because this Erein Seif goes into Kalim. So when a Yid is Meyached Yichudim, which is the language of the last few Prakim, Tes and Yud, or a Yid is Mechavim B'Shem, which is the language of the Prakim before. So okay, he's Misyaches to Erein Seif, he's not Misyaches to Midas, Chas V'Shalom, but it's Misyaches to Erein Seif which goes into Midas, and the Erein Seif which goes into Midas is so much lower than the Erein Seif which is outside the Midas. This is the kasha that the Rebbe is asking. Okay? What is the answer? The answer, in short, is Erein Seif is Erein Seif is Erein Seif. It's like a, what do they call it in English? There's a word for it. A catalyst. Catalyst. Catalyst means a starter, something which is the yesod for something. It's called Lashon Halacha a davar hamaimid, as a catalyst. A catalyst, a drop of it is the same thing as a ton. As long as you have a drop, it works. A catalyst is not measured in kamas eches, it's a certain quality. Erein Seif, whether it's Erein Seif Shlifnei HaTzimtzum, whether it's Erein Seif which is in a state of Gilu Lifnei HaTzimtzum, whether it's Erein Seif which is Nimshach La'achar HaTzimtzum, or it's Erein Seif which is Nimshach into Kalim. The answer to the question is godliness is godliness. That's the teretz. Chach Afilu, we speak about so many different levels and so many tzimtzumim and so many different changes. Says the Rebbe, it's true. All the tzimtzumim that we speak about are emes. But the tzimtzumim do not change the fundamental truth that we're dealing with godliness, elukus, getlichkeit. That's what we're dealing with, and that's the answer to the question. Okay, now, so we're going to talk about this. That's what we're going to talk about. I'm going to be talking to you about godliness. That's what I'm going to talk to you about. Okay. If anybody wants to say anything or ask any questions or in any way, shape, or form indicate, please do so now. And good morning, Yisrael Tzamach. I didn't see your gray rectangle appear on the screen. Okay, so I'm going to start to talk, okay? I was in New Haven for Shabbos. I'm just talking because I'm hoping it'll get my engine running. I was in New Haven for Shabbos. And there's a Yid there who is my father's generation. He's probably closer to 90 than to 80. He's not a youngster. A emes chassidish younger man. How do you call a Yid who's 85 a younger man? He said, well, if I'm 54, then he's a younger man. As a Yid. Has a white beard. So we verbringt, versteht sich, it's the Shabbos before Gimel Tammuz. So we verbringt. And so he says to me that 60 years ago, maybe more, he was learning in 770, and a bacher came over to him. This bacher, I know this bacher. This bacher today is also Ben Shmeinim v'Yoser. Like you have in Sefer Yeshua about Kaleb ben Yefuna, Nishkin younger man. And this second bacher was a very big lampen, the Zera Gute Kop, very smart guy. And the person who told me the Maise, I never heard of him being this world's big maskal. And he goes over to me and says to me, please explain to me what Atzilus means. Gib mir zu verstehen Atzilus. Was ist Atzilus? Ich will verstehen Atzilus. Lahaven in Atzilus. This was his question. So he tells me it was a funny thing. That Bacher can say for lernen, und ich can wenig lernen. Why is he asking me what's Atzilus? So when he told me the Maise, B'shas Maise, I was in the middle of a fabring and there were people sitting at the table. I didn't have a chance to even process the story. But since then, I've had some time. I sat in the car for 2 hours looking at a ceiling. Aber Gott sei Dank zu trachten. And if I could go back to New Haven and continue that conversation, I would say to that younger man, that person probably asked everybody in 770 the same question. What is Atzilus? He didn't ask you, he asked everybody. And me given a gear. And you can't lernen, got a gute Kopf. Sehr gute Kopf. Und er gewollt verstehen, Lahaven, and says, what is Atzilus? What is it? And he probably went from Bacher to Mashpia to Mashpia. And he probably remained unsatisfied. Correctly. Because Lahaven in Atzilus is very close to this same question that we're stuck on. Lahaven in Eidin Seif. What's Eidin Seif? What's godliness? Now again, this year alone, yeah, we've had 131 shurim, I think. We've had a lot of shurim this year. In the morning, I think this is my record. Morning shurim, I gave more this than I ever gave. Yeah, but let's say 100. I think we had about 131 shurim, something like that. I can look at the number. But auf a moment, gedenk ich nicht how many we had. Yeah. How many times did any stuff come up this year alone? It comes up and it comes up and it comes up. And every time it comes up, I always tell you the same thing. I'm not really explaining it. If we had more time, but we never seem to have the more time. And part of the reason we never seem to have the more time is because I don't think you could teach it. I don't think you can teach Eidin Seif. You can present Eidin Seif. Everybody needs to come to the sense of Eidin Seif by themselves. And understand, Eidin Seif is heilige Werte. Eidin Seif is fancy words, it's intellectual words, it's scholar words that you can translate. The light, which is infinite, which has no end, and whatever the case is. The real, when you say what is Eidin Seif, what you're really saying, what is godliness? It's hard enough to understand what God is. The truth of the matter is, it's impossible to understand what the Rebishter is. But a little bit we understand what Alakus is. What Alakah is, what the Rebishter is. But something which is not the Rebishter, yet it's nothing other than the Rebishter, it has no Metzias, B'fnei Atzmei, is a very complicated question. So in the world of Chasidus, for 250 years, since the times of the Alter Rebbe, the biggest Hasidim, who are a lot smarter than us, walked around and asked over and over and over and over again, Vos is Alakus? What is godliness? What is it? Because the only thing they knew about it is what it's not. It's not a creation. It's not the Eibishter. It has no limit. It has no form. It's a very hard thing to know. Ein Sof is very hard to know. The Alter Rebbe says has Maimorim, L'Havan Yin Ein Sof. The Tzemach Tzedek has Maimorim, L'Havan Yin Ein Sof. And in the Maimorim of the Rebbe Rashab, these Maimorim are repeated and they're developed and they're analyzed and they're explained. And then the Maimorim for the Frierdiker Rebbe goes on. It's never going to finish. This conversation, Vos is Elokus, what is godliness? What is Ein Sof? Is a conversation that's going to go on till Mashiach comes and after Mashiach comes, because it's really very hard to understand. Here we have an additional piece of the puzzle, right? Another piece of what is hard about L'Havan in Ein Sof is in this Maimer. What is that? The idea that Ein Sof can have many levels. Many levels. There's Ein Sof Shelifnei Atzimtzum, which is not even Gilui. Then there's Ein Sof Shelifnei Atzimtzum, which is at least Gilui. Then there's Ein Sof Shel Achar Atzimtzum, which is called Kav. Then there's Ein Sof, which actually goes into Kelim, which is called Mamala Kalam. And those are just 4 examples of Ein Sof. There's so many madregas of Ein Sof. Now, if you and I were 300 years ago living in Yerushalayim in the yeshiva of the Rashash, we would never use the words Ein Sof. Mekubalim don't use the language. They don't use the word Elokus. They don't use the word Ein Sof. They use the word Havaya. L'Havani and Havaya. Or Mekubal will say, what's Havaya? What's the Eibishter's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei? It's the same question. How could there be something which is not the Eibishter, but it is the Eibishter? It has many levels, but all the levels are the same. Ein Sof is an impossible subject to completely wrap your mind around. So Chassidus tries very hard. I mean, the Rabbeim try very, very hard to bring Ein Sof a little bit closer to our understanding. The Rabbeim are Pashat. You could probably use the words Meisa Nefesh. The Rabbeim try very, very, very hard to bring to us the sugya of Ein Sof. And when I grew up not so many years ago, yeah? I'm 1 generation older than you. So I had the number of mashpiyim. One of the mashpiyim that I had, that was royal Shmoy, who was a richtig maskel, was Reb Melech Tzvibel. I spent exactly 6 months in Maharstan. I should have spent 2 years there. I was a fool. But we can't nicht machen. The Eibishter gewollt, wie gewollt, nicht wie ich gewollt. And I learned by Reb Melech for a few months. And Reb Melech used to teach how he was taught. His mashpiyah was Reb Shlema Chaim. And by the time the question of Ein Sof got to us, in other words, if the Mekubalim would say, what's Shem Havaya? And the Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe and the Tzemach Tzedek would have said, L'Havan Yin Ein Sof. By the time the sugya of godliness got to our generations, its name had changed. In other words, Bochim sit in yeshiva and they talk, and they learn, and they fabring, and they ask questions. And sometimes they don't even know what they're talking about because the mashpiyim didn't give them the whole background. In our generations, a bocha was halt by learning in Chassidus. A boy doesn't just, as they say in the culture, he's just a good boy who does what he's told. But a boy who has a personal interest in understanding. The title of the sugya today, L'Havan Yin Ein Sof, is the sugya of Oir V'Shefa. That's what it's called. When I learned by Reb Melech chose a Maimed, by Yemeh Sheni Hikriv Nisana B'Tzur Tov Reish Pei, which is printed in the Sofas of Ketesim Chelik Beis. I remember the Maimed. We spent a lot of time learning it. He wasn't even our Magachir. He chose the Maimed. Our Magachir was Rabbi Yurkowitz, who now is our Rav in Eretz Yisrael. What's the Maimed about? Eir V'Shefa. Eir V'Shefa. The Rebbe Rashab has a Maimed Eir V'Shefa. That's Zeis Chukah Samach Vov. I mentioned it. The Frierdiker Rebbe has 5 of them, I think. They're all based on the one Maimed of the Rebbe Rashab, Eir V'Shefa. When the Rabbeim wanted to give us an ability to understand the Mashal of Ein Sof, they went off on this huge tangent, which is called Oir V'Shefa. And if you learn the sugya of Oir V'Shefa, when you're done learning the sugya of Oir V'Shefa, so Kleimesh, you'll be able to understand a little bit what Ein Sof is. I got a secret for you. If you learn the sugya of Oir V'Shefa, it's not hard. Not hard. I can repeat it to you, and I can explain it to you, and I can tell you. I mean, I'm not... It's not like I sat down for 100 hours and learned the whole Sugya V'Shefa. I can tell you B'Klolos, the Piratim of the Sugya V'Shefa. When you finish learning the Sugya V'Shefa, you know what happens next? Then you have to start to think. Not to think what's the Pshat V'Shefa. To think, so what is Ein Sof? Because in the end, I believe that to have even the smallest understanding of a Lakus is called in the Lashon HaChasidus a dead head. You cannot teach Ein Sof the way you teach 1 + 1 is 2. Because it's not a provable thing. It's not even it doesn't even make sense. You know what you do in Sugya Ein Sof? You take a piece of a mashal from here, 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 and you put them all together and say, take this part of this mashal, this part of this mashal, this part of this mashal, this part, put them all together, and now you have Ein Sof. The problem is the different Mishalim are Seisrim says, the Mishalim are contradictory. You take a piece of the mashal of Eir HaShemesh, of sunlight. You take a piece of the mashal of Eir HaNefesh, of the light of the soul. Yeah. And in some ways, you take a piece of the mashal, in some ways, of the mashal of Tipa, of Hilad. You take a piece from this mashal, a piece from this mashal. So don't pay attention to this. Just this part of this mashal use, this part of this mashal use, this part. Put these little pieces of mashal together. Now you understand it Ein Sof. And you scratch your head and say, it doesn't make any sense. It's Kenish Zayin. And that's true. It doesn't make any sense. Und es Kenish Zayin, aber das ist es. And this is why, like I keep on telling you, people spent their lives trying to understand. Again, in a narrow way, the question is, was is Atzilus? How could Atzilus? What is Atzilus? How could there be a world which is godliness? Either it's a world or it's God. That could be both. What is Atzilus? And in a broader way, the question is, was is Getlichkeit? What is godliness? So we're going to start this conversation now. I'm going to be going off soon. We're going to start this conversation now. We're going to continue this conversation tomorrow. And we're going to continue this conversation on Wednesday. I'm assuming that Thursday is going to be Gimel Tammuz. We'll have a different schedule. I'm hoping to be able to participate with the Bacham at least a little bit. So we have 2 days. Today and today's Monday. Tuesday, I don't think we're going to finish, but we're going to spend some time fabringing about the Sugya of Ein Sof. That's what I'm going to be doing now. In other words, I have no intention of learning with you Shoresh Mitzvas Hatefilla, which is a few lines down from here. There's 2 more lines that I want to read, and then I'm sort of finished for the year. So let me start with what you know already. What do you already know about Ein Sof? What you already know about Ein Sof, first of all, it's not Hashem anymore. It's not a creation yet, right? That's what I told you over and over again. Godliness is not the Eibishter anymore. It's not the world yet. It's in between. Second of all, another expression which I used a lot this year is that Elokus, Ein Sof, godliness, is the Eibishter as a Metzias Nimtza. Hashem exists as a built-in Metzias, non-existentially. In other words, Hashem exists Chayochel, without any relationships. There's no such thing as getting closer or farther from the Eibishter. Ein Sof is a Metzias Nimtza. Ein Sof is the Eibishter that's in the Lashon HaRambam a Matzeh Rishon, that exists in relationship with other things. That's another thing I told you. And the third thing that I keep on telling you is that Ein Sof is Dveikus. You know, I should probably write this up and put it up so you could see it. I should make a list so that you'll have pointers that'll help you understand it. If I remember, I'll do it. That Ein Sof is Dveikus. What's the taich Dveikus? Dveikus is the taich, I'm not bottle. Bittul means I'm me and I serve you. Right? In the Lashon HaRambam, Yedim is Atzvam, V'yedim is Elosam. First they know themselves, and then they know their source. Ein Sof isn't Bittul. Ein Sof is Dveikus. Ein Sof does not have an I. Ein Sof can never say, Ich zog, Ich halt, Ich geh, Ich kom, Ich steh, Ich. It's not the philosophy, it's a fact. Ein Sof does not have an I. There's no I in Ein Sof. Dveikus. Ein Sof is representative of the Eibishter. Merganisht. So Rabbi said, I just told you 3 things that we've already talked about kama this year. Number 1, Ein Sof is not the Eibishter, but it's not creation. Number 2, Ein Seif is the Eibishter as a Matzah b'Metzias. Metzias Nimtz, interactive. And number 3, that you can't call it even bittul, you can only call it dvekas. Okay? Now, this is all familiar stuff. Now we're going to continue this conversation, okay? When Hasidus wants to talk about the mashal of Ein Seif, they introduce us to Oir and Shefa. L'havin inyan Oir v'Shefa, the Maimon Zeis Chukas and Samach Vav, which is based on L'havin Ein Seif and the Tzemach Tzedek, which I believe is based on L'havin Ein Seif and the Alter Rebbe. They're all speaking about Oir v'Shefa. What is the meaning of the word Oir and what is the meaning of the word Shefa? Let's start with Shefa. Shefa means I give you something. That's what Shefa means. I give you something. Shefa means I give you something. In the words I give you something, there are 4 emphases. There's I, there's you, there's give, and there's something. And all of these words are very, very important. I am giving you something. Okay? I'm giving. What's an example of Shefa? The simplest example of Shefa is I have a cup of water, and I pour off a half, and I give it to you. If I give you a half a cup of water, I'm now missing a half a cup of water, right? What happens if I have in my brain an idea, and I give you that idea? So I don't lose half the idea because I gave it to you, right? But I lost time that I can't get back. I lost energy, which I invested. And of course, when I gave you the idea that I have, that you should have it, I had to change it to reach you. Had to make a tzimtzum, and the idea that it should reach you. These are mishalim for Shefa. There are 2 basic rules about Shefa. There's 2 basic rules about Shefa. Rule number 1, you cannot give all of yourself in Shefa. All of you, all of me cannot come to you through the Shefa medium. It's impossible. If I am proactively, that means on purpose, bekavona, giving you something, if I am giving you something, it's only something, it's not everything. I can't give you everything, impossible. There's no way a human being give all of himself to somebody else. The only example for a person giving all of himself to another is tipa, is helada. Because in the mashal of tipa, which is called hashpa'ah, shefa, atzmis, you have both milas, side the mila of eid and side the mila of shefa. I don't want to be maidech in it, but with the exception of helada, there's no way I could give you everything of me. So the chesaron of shefa is when someone is a mashpia, who is giving shefa, he's giving something. What's called I'm giving you something. Yeah? I'm learning a Maimon Chasidus. I found it very, very exciting. So I run out into the street. I bump into it and say, Hezachai Shalom Bey, you want to hear this word? And Shalom Bey says, of course. So I stop and I tell him the word. It took me time. It took him time. I had to think what I was going to say, to think how I was going to say it. He had to listen to it. He had to understand it. He paid attention. He got it. Oh, I was a mashpia. But mashpia is something. You cannot give b'derech mashpia your whole self to somebody else. Impossible. When a mashpia gives a mushpa, when a teacher gives a student, when a rich man gives a poor man, when a bal regesh shares his feelings with somebody who is lacking regesh, makes no difference what. When a bal chush shares from his chushim, it's called shefa. I'm not giving you all of me, I'm giving you a piece of me. I'm giving you a piece, one idea, one feeling, one thought, one image, one imagination, so on. But shefa has a very big maila. Shefa has a moir and dika maila. What's the maila of shefa? That the mashpia is nitfas in the hashpah. If I give you only one idea, one simple idea, the rest of my ideas you don't know. Whatever else going in my brain, weißt du nicht. Du weißt nur, was ich dir gegeben habe. One idea. Along with that idea, I gave you a piece of me. When a mashpia is mashpia, shefa, he gives his whole self to his makabel. When I'm giving you, and I'm talking to you now, yeah, there's a shir, this kind of acht yidden. I'm talking to you, yeah, I can't do anything else while I'm doing this. I have to be totally invested in giving you this shir and talking to you about the sugya of Erev Shefa. It's a small little sugya, and I'm giving you a small little piece of it in a very small little way based on the limitations of my understanding, and so on and so forth. But I'm giving you myself. I can't be doing 5 things at the same time. So if you want to use oisius, based on mathematical language, the chesaron of shefa is, I'm only giving you something. I'm not giving you everything. The mile of shefa is that I'm giving you me. When a mashpia is mashpia to a mushpa, The mashpia is nitfas in the hashpah. I have to be totally invested in what I'm giving you. That's the upside and the downside of the mashal of shefa. Okay, now I'm looking at the clock. So I'm doing now oid. We're going to come back to all of this tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning we're going to revisit all of this. Okay, we're going to spend the next 2 days talking about the mashal of alakus. Like I said, when I'm done, you're still not going to understand. Okay, but we're going to try. That's how we're finishing the year. This is it. This is the last series of Shiyurim, Lahav, and Yinedin stuff. I keep on talking about it. We're going to talk about it some more. Oir. What's the mashal of oir? A person walks in the street, and you happen to be there, and you see his face. So it says in Torah, and apparently it's true even in other chokhmas, lahavdil alvavi avdalas, that on the face of a person you have the whole person. Whatever you are, chokhmas adam, there's something called chokhmas apartzuf, chokhmas adam toyer panav, on a person's face you can see everything about what a person is written on his face. Everything about what a person is written on his face. You look at a person's face, you see everything, yeah? So you walk by a guy in the street, you see his countenance, yeah? What did he give you? What did he give you? What did he give you? He gave you nothing. Why did he give you nothing? He didn't stop. He didn't ask you your name. He didn't give you shalom aleichem with an elbow, with a handshake, with a 6 feet distance. He walked by. And mitzadecha, there is no hashpah whatsoever. There is no kiru between mashpia and mekabel at all. On the other hand, when you look at his face, and you have the ability to see on his face who this person is, you have the whole person. That's the taich oir. That's the meaning of the word oir. Oir, for lack of English translations, is a reflection. Whatever the source is, the light carries. Whatever Hashem is, it ain't safe carries. But there's a huge chesaron in oir. The huge chesaron in oir is that there's no muhus tvarma. You don't give oir. Oir happens by itself. You can't possibly give oir. You can give shefa. You cannot give oir. So now you have the grid, you have the basic building blocks of the classic sugi of Eir v'Shefa, which all the mashpiyim teach, Eimol, Tzveimol, Dreimol, Tzenmol, and they're teaching the sugi of Eir v'Shefa because they want their Talmidim to understand Lahav Vinyan Eir ain't safe, and you understand the Mile of Shefa and the Chesaron of Shefa, the Mile of Eir and the Chesaron of Eir. The Mile of Shefa is that the mashpiyah gives a piece of himself. The chesaron of shefa is you're only giving a muhus tvarma, something specific. You're not giving all of yourself. The mile of oir is that the whole mashpia comes across in the hashpah. But the chesaron of oir is that it's only ha'ara. None of the oir you don't give. Oir just is. Okay, I'm going to let you guys hang. It's 9:29. If you want to go into rooms to answer the questions, I would very much appreciate that. I want to daven a minyan. I'll have a minyan at 9:45. I haven't been able to daven a minyan for Kimat not. I want to go and daven with a minyan. Okay? So I'll see you tomorrow morning. 10 o'clock at night we're learning Vata Tetzav. And I don't know yet what the schedule of Wednesday and Thursday, but I'm imagining that at one point or another we're going to get together and have a little time. Benegay to Yom HaGadol VaKadosh. Benegay to Gimel Tammuz. Okay. Good morning.